2 a.m. Emma stepped through the door. Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He opened it. In the photo, a man with a smug expression sat comfortably, eating a bowl of soup, the same herbal soup Ethan had carefully prepared for his wife. Ethan didn't react immediately. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the couch, his eyes calm as they met Emma's. His voice was steady. "Were you with Luke last night?" Emma froze for a split second, but quickly regained her composure. "He had a cold," she said coolly. "I was just taking care of him." Ethan remained silent. He reached under the coffee table, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the surface between them. Emma glanced down. The marriage contract. The silence stretched between them like an unspoken force, pressing down on the room. The ticking clock on the wall echoed in the stillness, each second punctuating the tension. Ethan didn't move, his eyes studying her carefully, as if waiting for her to say something else. Emma took off her coat slowly, deliberately, hanging it on the rack by the door. Her movements were measured, controlled, anything to avoid looking at the folder in front of her. "You're home late," Ethan finally said, his tone unreadable. Emma exhaled softly. "I told you I was taking care of Luke. He wasn't feeling well." Ethan gave a small nod, as if acknowledging the excuse, but his eyes flickered toward the folder. "And yet, he seemed to have enough energy to eat the soup I made for you." Emma stiffened. Her eyes darted to his phone, still unlocked, the image of Luke, smirking as if mocking him, staring back at her. She pressed her lips together, choosing her next words carefully. "I didn't know he would take a picture." Ethan's lips curved into something resembling a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you didn't." Another pause. Emma finally took a step forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "Ethan, Sit." Ethan's voice was calm, but it held an underlying firmness that left no room for argument. Emma hesitated, then sat down across from him. The folder lay between them, an invisible boundary neither of them was willing to cross. Ethan's fingers tapped lightly against the table, his gaze never leaving hers. "Do you remember what's in here?" Emma's throat felt dry. Of course she remembered. The contract they signed 3 years ago, an agreement based on convenience, necessity, and cold logic. A marriage with an expiration date. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly. Ethan leaned back slightly, regarding her with the same detached expression he had maintained since she walked in. "Because it's time." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why. It wasn't as if she hadn't seen this coming. 3 years. That was the deal. If after 3 years she still didn't love him, he would leave. She looked at him now. This man who had stood by her side, who had never asked for anything in return, who had loved her even when she had given him nothing but distance. "You're ending this early," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "Am I?" Emma felt something inside her twist. She had always assumed he would wait, that he would stay until the very last moment, hoping she would finally turn around and see him. But now, looking at him, she realized something. He had already let go. She reached for the folder, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped it open. The contract was there, along with another document, a divorce agreement. Emma stared at it, her mind momentarily blank. "This? You don't have to sign it now," Ethan said, cutting her off. "But I want you to think about it." She looked up at him. "Why now?" Ethan exhaled through his nose, a quiet breath of amusement. "Does it matter?" It did. It mattered because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one making the decision. She was supposed to have more time. She was supposed to be in control. "Ethan," she started, but stopped when she saw the way his jaw tightened. He wasn't angry. That would have been easier to deal with. Instead, he just looked tired. 3 years. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of hoping. And tonight, he had finally decided that was enough. Emma swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the edge of the folder. "This isn't what I—" Ethan stood up. She looked up at him, startled by the sudden movement. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached for his phone, glanced at the time, then turned his attention back to her. "Go get some rest," he said, his voice gentler than before. "We'll talk tomorrow." Emma wanted to protest, to say something, anything, to stop him from walking away. But for the first time since she had met him, she had the feeling that no matter what she said, it wouldn't change his mind. And that scared her. Because if Ethan stopped waiting for her, she wasn't sure what that meant for her anymore. Emma's fingers hovered over the folder, hesitating before finally flipping it open. The pages inside were crisp, untouched despite the weight they carried. At the very top, bold letters marked its significance: marriage contract. She already knew what was written. She had seen it before, 3 years ago, when she had signed it without a second thought. Her eyes drifted across the clauses, each word a reminder of the deal they had made. 3 years ago. Luke had left without warning. One moment, he had been there, holding her hand, making promises of a future together. The next, he was gone. No explanations, no apologies, just an empty space where he used to be. And then came the news. Her grandfather, the patriarch of the family, had fallen gravely ill. The will had already been drawn up, and in it there was one peculiar condition. The next heir had to be married to a man with a specific birth sign, one that supposedly aligned with the family's fortunes. The problem? Luke had never fit the requirement, but Ethan did. Present. Emma's grip on the folder tightened. She didn't look up, but she could feel Ethan watching her from across the table. His presence was steady, unwavering, just like it had always been. The contract had been his sacrifice. She had needed a husband, he had needed nothing except her. And so they had made a deal. 3 years. 3 years for her to decide if she could love him. 3 years for him to prove that she could. The deadline had not yet arrived, but here they were. Emma's throat felt dry as she flipped to the last page, where the signatures were already in place. Her name. His name. And now, a divorce agreement waiting to be completed. The room felt colder than before. Ethan, still silent, reached for the pen beside the folder. He twirled it between his fingers for a brief moment before sliding it across the table toward her. "Sign it." His voice was calm even. "You don't have to force yourself anymore." Emma's gaze snapped up. Force herself? She parted her lips, but no words came out. She had expected Ethan to hold on until the last possible moment, but now he was letting go first. And for some reason, that realization unsettled her more than she thought it would. "Ethan," she said finally, her voice quieter than she intended. He didn't respond. He simply leaned back in his chair, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. This was different from the Ethan she knew. The man she had married, contract or not, had always been patient, waiting in the background, never pressuring her for anything. But tonight he had reached his limit. Emma looked down at the pen. Her fingers itched to move, to pick it up, to end this as cleanly as he seemed to want. But she didn't. Instead, she turned another page in the contract, stalling. "This isn't necessary," she said carefully. "The contract still has time left." Ethan's lips pressed together, but there was no amusement in his expression. "It doesn't matter," he said. "I'm done waiting." Her breath hitched slightly. Done waiting. For 3 years, Ethan had always waited. For her to come home. For her to acknowledge him. For her to love him. He had never asked for more. He had never demanded anything from her. And yet, without her realizing, he had made a choice. She had assumed he would be there until the very end. But now, he was the one walking away first. Emma's fingers curled against the edge of the folder. "Ethan," she said again, but the hesitation in her voice was more evident this time. Something flickered in his gaze. "I told you," he said, standing up. "You don't have to force yourself anymore." He took a step back. Emma instinctively wanted to reach for him, but she didn't. She couldn't. Because wasn't this what she had always wanted? Wasn't this how it was supposed to end? She was supposed to sign the papers. She was supposed to let him leave, and then Luke would return. She had promised him, hadn't she? She had told him that when the contract ended, she would be free. But now, sitting here with the contract in front of her, pen within reach, something in her chest tightened. It wasn't relief, it wasn't joy, it was something else. Something closer to loss. The thought unsettled her. "You're really doing this," she murmured. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. "Shouldn't I?" She had no answer, because she didn't know. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure what she wanted. Ethan exhaled, looking at her one last time before stepping toward the door. "I'll be in the study if you need anything." And then he left. The silence he left behind was heavier than anything she had ever felt before. Emma looked at the contract again. The ink on their signatures had long since dried. Now only one thing remained, her final decision. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was ready to make it. The contract lay open in front of her. The pen sat untouched on the table. Emma stared at it, but she didn't move. The silence in the room was deafening, stretching between her and Ethan like an invisible wall. All she had to do was pick up the pen and sign. It was simple. It should have been simple. Yet her fingers wouldn't move. Her eyes flickered toward Ethan, who stood near the window, his back partially turned to her. He wasn't watching her, wasn't waiting with the quiet patience he usually had. No, this time, he wasn't waiting at all. For the first time in 3 years, he was ready to walk away first. Emma swallowed, her throat dry. "Ethan." He didn't turn around. "Sign it." The steadiness in his voice was unnerving. There was no anger, no resentment, just an acceptance that made her chest feel tight. Emma forced herself to breathe. "The contract isn't up yet," she said carefully. "There's no need to rush." A soft, bitter chuckle escaped him. He finally turned, his gaze meeting hers. "You really think that matters?" She blinked, taken aback. "Of course, it does." Ethan stepped closer, slow and measured, stopping just across from her. He looked at her for a long moment, studying her the way he always did, like he was searching for something she refused to give. Then he exhaled softly and shook his head. "I don't want to wait anymore." Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She had expected him to argue, to push back. She had expected frustration, maybe even resentment. But this quiet surrender, it was worse. "Ethan," she started, unsure of what she even wanted to say. "I used to think." He cut her off, his voice lower now, almost thoughtful. "I used to believe that, eventually, you'd look at me the way you used to look at him." Emma's fingers curled against her palm. "But you never did," Ethan continued, his expression unreadable. "And I realize now, I was just fooling myself." The words landed heavier than she expected, settling deep in her chest. Fooling himself. She had always assumed Ethan would stay, no matter what, that he would wait. Because he always had. Because that was the kind of man he was. Because he loved her. Didn't he? Emma's gaze dropped to the contract again, as if the words on the page could give her an answer she didn't yet have. A part of her knew he was right. She didn't love him, not the way he wanted her to, not the way he deserved. But he had been good to her. She thought about the nights he stayed up when she was sick, the mornings he made breakfast even when he barely ate anything himself, the quiet way he always made sure she had everything she needed before she even asked. She thought about 3 years of silent devotion, and she thought about what it would mean if he wasn't there anymore. Emma clenched her jaw and pushed the thought away. This was the deal. This was always the deal. She had never promised anything more. So why did it feel like she was losing something? Emma inhaled sharply. "Ethan?" He tilted his head slightly, waiting. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't even sure what she wanted to say. So instead, she reached for the pen. She wrapped her fingers around it, feeling its weight against her palm. One signature. That was all it would take. Her hand hovered over the paper, but she didn't sign. Her fingers refused to move. The room felt suffocatingly quiet. And then Ethan spoke. "You can take your time." His voice was calm, resigned. "But I won't change my mind." Emma's grip tightened around the pen. She looked up at him. "You're really doing this?" His gaze didn't waver. "Yes." She searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would tell her he didn't mean it. But she found nothing. Ethan wasn't waiting for her anymore, and for the first time in 3 years, Emma felt like she was the one being left behind. The air between them was thick with tension. Neither spoke. The pen still rested in Emma's grip, hovering above the contract, but she had yet to sign. Ethan watched her in silence, his patience worn thin, his expression unreadable. Emma could feel her own hesitation suffocating her. She should sign. She knew that. But something she couldn't name, held her back. Then her phone rang. The sudden sound shattered the quiet between them. Emma startled, blinking as she looked down at the screen. Unknown number. Her brows furrowed as she hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Miss Carter?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but there was urgency in his tone. "This is Daniel Hensley. I'm Luke's assistant." Emma's stomach dropped. "Luke? He's in the hospital." The man continued quickly. "He had a sudden relapse. It doesn't look good." Emma felt everything else fade away. Ethan. The contract. The conversation they had just been having. Gone. All that remained was the sharp, immediate panic clawing at her chest. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice thinner than she intended. There was a slight hesitation on the other end. "The doctors are doing their best, but they told me to call you. He's been asking for you." Something inside her cracked. Luke was asking for her. She barely registered the way Ethan's expression darkened, the way he subtly shifted his stance, as if bracing himself. Emma didn't even think. She grabbed her purse. Her body moved on instinct, the urgency in her blood drowning out everything else. She had to go. She had to. She turned toward the door. Steps hurried, mind already at the hospital beside Luke's bed. And then, a voice, calm and sharp, cut through her panic. "You can go." Emma froze. Ethan stood exactly where he had been before, arms crossed loosely, his gaze colder than she had ever seen it. A slow, knowing smirk played on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "But don't forget to sign before you leave." The words hit her like ice water. Emma's fingers curled around the strap of her purse. She turned to look at him fully. Really look at him. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't asking her to stay. He was giving her a choice, and he already knew what it would be. Emma's throat tightened. She should say something. She should explain. But what was there to explain? Luke was in the hospital. Luke needed her. That was all that mattered, wasn't it? The silence stretched. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't move. He just waited. Emma's fingers twitched against her purse strap. And then she turned. She walked toward the door, without signing, without looking back. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic, a scent Emma had always found unsettling. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow down the white hallways as she walked briskly toward the private patient rooms. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Luke was here. He was sick, and he had asked for her. The moment she reached his room, she hesitated, her hand tightening around the door handle. A part of her didn't want to see him like this, weak, vulnerable, a shadow of the man she had once known. But she pushed the thought aside. With a quiet breath, she stepped inside. Luke lay motionless against the hospital bed, his skin pale, lips slightly cracked. The beeping of machines filled the silence, tracking his shallow breathing. For a moment, Emma just stood there, frozen. It had been years since she last saw him in person. The boy she had once loved so fiercely, the boy who had left her behind without a word. But now he was here. And he looked fragile. His eyes fluttered open as if sensing her presence. When he saw her, a slow, tired smile stretched across his lips. "Emma," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Her throat tightened. "Luke." She took a step closer, and without thinking, her fingers found his, curling gently around his weak grip. His skin was cold. For the first time since she had received the call, fear coiled deep in her stomach. "I thought," Luke exhaled, squeezing her hand weakly, "I thought I wouldn't get to see you again." A lump formed in her throat. "Don't say that," she chided softly, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "You're going to be fine." Luke let out a weak chuckle. "You always did try to make things sound better than they were." Emma swallowed hard, looking away. The silence stretched, heavy and unspoken. "And then, I never stopped thinking about you," Luke said suddenly. Emma turned back to him, startled. His gaze was softer than she remembered, filled with something almost fragile. "I know I left," he continued, his voice strained. "I know I hurt you, but not a single day went by that I didn't regret it." Emma didn't respond. She couldn't. Because if she did, if she acknowledged the way his words made something deep inside her ache, she wasn't sure what she would say. Luke must have sensed her hesitation because his lips twitched into a sad smile. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared that I wasn't enough for you. Scared that if I stayed, I'd hold you back." Emma's fingers tightened slightly around his. "That wasn't your choice to make." "I know," he whispered. "But I was young, and I was stupid, and I thought I was doing what was best." A bitter laugh escaped him. "But all I did was ruin the best thing that ever happened to me." Emma felt herself waver. Because despite everything, despite the hurt, the betrayal, the years of silence, hearing him say those words still made her heart clench. She had spent so long wondering why he had left. Now, she finally had an answer. And she didn't know what to do with it. A soft knock at the door broke the moment. Emma turned just as Luke's assistant, Daniel, stepped inside. "Miss Carter," he greeted with a small nod before glancing toward Luke. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you should know." Emma frowned. "What is it?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then looked at Luke as if silently asking for permission. Luke sighed. "Just tell her." Daniel turned back to Emma. "He's been keeping tabs on you." Emma's breath hitched. "What?" Daniel continued, his voice steady, matter-of-fact. "Ever since you got married, Luke has been following everything. Your life, your marriage, the things you've been doing, he never really let go." Emma felt her pulse stutter. Slowly she turned to Luke, her expression unreadable. "Is that true?" Luke's jaw tensed, but he didn't deny it. "I needed to know if you were happy," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "If he was treating you right. If you—" He exhaled. "If you had moved on." Emma didn't know what to say. She had spent so long thinking he had abandoned her completely, that he had left without a second thought. But now she realized he had never stopped watching, never stopped caring, never stopped loving her. Something inside her shifted, like a puzzle piece falling back into place. Maybe, just maybe, everything was finally coming back together. The house was silent when Emma stepped inside. Too silent. She had expected tension, an argument, a confrontation, something, but instead there was nothing. No warmth, no presence. Just emptiness. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as she walked further in, a strange feeling settling deep in her stomach. And then she saw it. The coffee table was nearly bare, except for a single neatly stacked pile of papers. Her breath caught in her throat, a divorce agreement. She swallowed, forcing her feet forward. The air felt heavier the closer she got, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the document. Her name was already there. So was Ethan's. But this time, he didn't need her signature anymore. A lump formed in her throat. Emma's fingers traced the paper absently, her mind struggling to process what she was looking at. This wasn't the contract. This wasn't the agreement they had signed 3 years ago. This was final. No waiting. No conditions. No more Ethan. Her eyes drifted to the object lying beside it. A key. The key to their home. The realization hit her in full force then. A sudden, sharp ache spreading through her chest. He was gone. He had actually left. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding, her fingers tightening around the cold metal. She didn't know why she was surprised. He had warned her, "I don't want to wait anymore." And yet, some part of her, the part that had grown used to him always being there, hadn't believed he would really do it. But now, standing in the middle of an empty house, staring at an unsigned contract and a single house key, Emma felt something she hadn't expected. A hollowness. A quiet, creeping emptiness that settled deep in her bones. She wandered through the house in a daze, her fingers ghosting over familiar spaces. The kitchen, where Ethan had made her breakfast, even when she barely touched it. The living room, where he had waited for her, night after night, even when she came home late. Their bedroom, where his side of the closet was now empty. Gone. Just like that. Emma exhaled slowly, pressing the heel of her hand against her chest, as if that would ease the tightness building there. She had always assumed she would be the one to leave first, that when this marriage ended, it would be on her terms. But Ethan had made the decision for her. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure how she felt about that. The house felt different now. Colder, emptier. Emma sat on the couch, the divorce agreement still lying on the coffee table in front of her, untouched. Next to it, the key Ethan had left behind glinted under the soft glow of the living room lamp. She stared at it, her thoughts tangled, looping back to the same question over and over again. Why did it feel like something was missing? She had known this was coming. She had been prepared for it, hadn't she? But then why? Why did her chest feel so hollow? She leaned forward, pressing her elbows against her knees, fingers threading through her hair. And then, without meaning to, she started remembering. 3 years. That was how long she and Ethan had been married. A marriage built on a contract, not love. At least that's what she had told herself. But now, sitting in their empty house, she could feel the weight of those 3 years pressing down on her. The mornings when she had woken up to the smell of fresh coffee, even though Ethan barely drank it himself. The nights when she had come home late, exhausted, only to find that he had left the light on for her. The times when she had been sick, curled up in bed, feeling miserable, and Ethan had stayed by her side, bringing her medicine, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, watching over her even when she told him she was fine. She squeezed her eyes shut. Why was she thinking about this now? Why did it matter? Her mind drifted to Luke. The way he had held her hand in the hospital, whispering that he had never stopped thinking about her. The way he had looked at her, eyes filled with regret, telling her how much he had missed her. For so long, she had convinced herself that Luke was the one. That no matter what happened, she and Luke were meant to be. But now she found herself comparing them. And for the first time, Luke was coming up short, because in all the years they had been together, had Luke ever stayed up all night just to take care of her? Had Luke ever remembered the little things, like how she liked her coffee or which book she had left unfinished on the nightstand? Had Luke ever put her needs before his own, not because he had to, but simply because he wanted to? Her hands clenched. She had spent so long waiting for Luke. But Ethan had been right there all along, loving her, taking care of her, giving her everything, and she had never even noticed. A sharp breath shuddered through her. Her eyes flickered back to the key on the table. She picked it up, running her fingers over the cool metal, feeling the weight of it in her palm. This house had never really felt like home before. But now that Ethan was gone, it didn't feel like anything at all. It started as an accident. Emma hadn't been thinking about Ethan, or at least that's what she told herself, when she stopped by the cafe that afternoon. It was just another place, another routine, something familiar in a life that suddenly felt less certain. She had been stirring her coffee absent-mindedly when she overheard it. 2 women at the next table, chatting idly. "Did you see Ethan Carter the other day?" Emma's fingers stilled. "I did." I barely recognized him. He looked different. Happier. And that woman he was with, God, she was stunning. Emma's breath caught. Her grip tightened around her cup, but she forced herself to stay still, to listen. I heard she just got back from abroad. Someone important, apparently. They look good together, don't you think? Oh, absolutely. And the way he was looking at her. Emma didn't wait to hear more. She set her cup down, heart pounding, and before she could think twice, she was already walking out the door. She didn't know why she was here. She had no right to be. But there she was, standing outside the cafe where she had been told Ethan would be. And he was, sitting by the window across from a woman who was, indeed, stunning. Emma should have turned away. She should have walked past, ignored it, told herself it wasn't her business. But she didn't. She stood there, frozen, staring through the glass, unable to look away. Ethan looked different. Relaxed. At ease in a way she had never seen before. His posture, always tense around her, was loose, his smile easy, his laughter genuine. And the woman? She leaned toward him slightly, saying something that made him chuckle, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a way that was so effortlessly intimate it made something tighten in Emma's chest. Jealousy. It hit her fast, sharp, and unexpected. She had never felt this before. Not when Ethan had signed the divorce papers, not when he had walked out of their house without looking back. But now she felt it, and she hated it. The woman laughed again, and Ethan, her Ethan, smiled at her. And that was when Emma finally turned away. She didn't want to see anymore, didn't want to admit what she was feeling, didn't want to acknowledge the one truth she had spent too long ignoring. She had never truly believed he would move on. But he had. And now she was the one left standing in the cold. Luke sat across from her, his fingers idly tracing the rim of his coffee cup. The cafe was quiet, the kind of mid-afternoon lull where conversations softened and time seemed to stretch. Emma was here with him, just like before, just like it was supposed to be. And yet, something felt off. She stirred her drink absently, her gaze drifting toward the window. It had been weeks since Ethan left. Weeks since she had walked into their home and found nothing but emptiness waiting for her. Weeks since she had seen him, sitting in that cafe with another woman, smiling in a way that wasn't meant for her. She should have been able to move on. Luke was here. Luke, who had always been the answer, the missing piece, the person she had waited for. And yet, her fingers tightened around her cup. Why did it feel like she was still waiting? Luke was talking. Something about his plans, his future, the things he wanted to do now that he was back. Emma tried to focus. She really did. But the words felt distant, as if she were listening to someone speaking from another room. She nodded at the right moments, offered small smiles, but the connection, the effortless ease they once had, wasn't there. Conversations with Luke had once been natural, flowing seamlessly, filled with laughter and shared dreams. Now they felt forced. Like she was trying too hard to recapture something that had already slipped away. She felt the weight of his gaze on her. "Emma," he said suddenly, voice quieter. She blinked, refocusing. "Yeah?" Luke hesitated, then exhaled. "I want us to try again." The words hung in the air, heavy, expectant. Emma's breath caught. This was it. This was what she had been waiting for, wasn't it? She should feel happy, relieved. But instead, all she felt was hesitation. Her fingers curled against her palm, a sick realization settling in her stomach. She had spent so long thinking about Ethan, not Luke, Ethan. And suddenly, she wasn't so sure what she had been waiting for anymore. Emma stood outside Ethan's apartment, heart pounding harder than it should. It had taken her too long to get here. Too long to realize what she really wanted. She had spent weeks trapped in her own thoughts, trying to force something with Luke that wasn't there, trying to ignore the one person she hadn't been able to stop thinking about. And now, here she was, hoping it wasn't too late. She raised her hand and knocked. The door opened after a moment. Ethan stood there, dressed casually, a hint of surprise flickering across his face when he saw her. "Emma." His voice was calm, neutral. She tried to read him, but he wasn't giving anything away. Not like before. Not like when he had still been waiting. Emma swallowed, gripping the strap of her bag a little tighter. "Can we talk?" A beat of silence. Then he stepped back, allowing her in. The apartment was different. Smaller than their old house, but warm, lived in. There were books on the coffee table, a jacket draped casually over the armrest. The kind of details that made a place feel like home. And for the first time, Emma realized this wasn't her home anymore. She turned to face him, suddenly feeling more nervous than she had expected. Ethan watched her patiently, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake." His expression didn't change. "What kind of mistake?" Emma's fingers curled slightly. "Letting you go." A pause, a long one. She willed him to say something, anything. But he didn't, so she took another step forward. "Can we start over?" The words felt heavier than she thought they would, because she already knew the answer, and still she needed to hear him say it. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. Soft, gentle, final. "You're too late." Emma's breath hitched. The words shouldn't have hurt as much as they did, but they did, because he meant them. And suddenly she saw it, the way he stood now, lighter, freer. The way he looked at her. Not with longing, not with regret, but with acceptance. She glanced around the apartment again, and that's when she noticed it. A woman's scarf draped over the back of a chair, a second coffee mug on the counter. Subtle signs, small details. But they told her everything she needed to know. Ethan had moved on, built a new life, found love elsewhere, and she was no longer a part of it. For the first time, Emma felt the full weight of losing something she never realized she wanted. And this time, there was no getting it back. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.